Steve Henderson exploded mid-sentence, right after offering homemade snickerdoodles to the Galactic Lords. One moment he was smiling, nervously of course, holding out a tray of cookies like a polite Earth delegate. The next moment, his body atomized into sparkling particles, leaving nothing but the faint scent of cinnamon and diplomatic failure hanging in the air. The Lords didn't flinch. They simply blinked, if you could call it blinking when some of them didn't have eyes, and continued the meeting. That's when Earth's AI ambassador froze, sparks flying from its logic core, and muttered the words that would change everything. Deploying contingency asset, him. They had killed the wrong human. Steve wasn't just Earth's top diplomat, he was the nice one. The one with the calm voice, the tea collection, and that quirky habit of humming 90s love songs when stressed. He believed peace was always possible if you listened long enough. And yet, when he tried to offer peace, the Galactic Lords chose violence. Maybe they thought humans were weak. Or maybe they thought Earth had no backup plan. But they forgot one thing: Earth is a planet full of people who write revenge movies, worship action heroes, and invented hot sauce so spicy it makes you hallucinate your ancestors. And buried deep under the Mojave Desert, Earth kept its wildest card off the table for just such an occasion. Dominic Kane was 62% scar tissue, 14% titanium, and 24% unresolved trauma. Nobody liked him, not even Earth's military brass, but he was good at solving problems that couldn't be reasoned with. When the holographic briefing reached his underground cell, because, yes, it was technically a prison, he was upside down doing one-handed push-ups on a punching bag he'd hung from the ceiling. He didn't stop when the defense minister's nervous face appeared in shimmering blue light. "They killed Steve," the minister said, voice trembling. Kane grunted. "The cookie guy?" "Yes, during negotiations. In cold blood." "What kind of idiot kills the cookie guy?" "We believe it was symbolic," the minister said. "They were making a point." Kane dropped from the bag, sweat rolling down his back like slow lava. "Then it's time we make ours." Of course, they didn't just throw him on a rocket and wish him luck. Earth's best scientists spent years designing a diplomacy vessel, the D-1PL-0, known informally as the Diplomacy. It was sleek, self-aware, and absolutely hated being touched. When Kane stepped aboard wearing a cargo vest stuffed with protein bars and spare knives, the ship immediately tried to eject him. "Unacceptable life form detected," the ship announced. "Yeah? Then go ahead. Eject me," Kane said, dropping into the pilot's seat like it owed him money. "Let's see what happens when Earth's last hope splatters across the moon." A long pause. Then, reluctantly, the ship said, "Welcome aboard, Dominic Kane." "Damn right." As the ship launched through the stratosphere, Kane reviewed the file on the Galactic Lords. There were 20 of them. Each represented a different species, none of which had ever experienced being punched in the throat. He found that deeply unfortunate. The Lords called themselves the Shepherds of Balance. From what Kane could tell, they were more like galactic HOE members with laser cannons. They controlled trade, travel, law, and now, evidently, death. Steve had approached them with humility. Kane intended to approach them with presence. He arrived 3 days later, stepping off the shuttle onto the Grand Convocation deck wearing civilian boots and chewing on a stick of mint gum like it was a cigar. 100 alien species watched him in silence. He walked slowly, deliberately, like the floor might insult him and he'd need to take action. No security check. No translator. Just one man with a jawline you could bottle and sell as a weapon. The Lords were seated on their elevated dais, towering above him like intergalactic judges. The one who had killed Steve, a creature resembling a lava-covered peacock, studied Kane with something approaching amusement. "You are not the diplomat," the Lord said. "Nope," Kane replied. "Then who are you?" Kane glanced up at the creature that murdered Steve and spoke with the calm, clear tone of a man ordering coffee in the middle of a bank robbery. "I'm the guy you get when you killed the nice one." Gasps rippled through the room. One alien dropped a translator orb. Another tried to interpret whether this was humor or threat, but found themselves overwhelmed by a third option: concern. I am not here to declare war, Kane continued. I'm here to finish the negotiations you started. Steve brought cookies. I brought consequences. Some lords chuckled. Most did not. The Peacock Lord narrowed his obsidian eyes. Do you believe one human can intimidate this council? Kane cracked his neck. I don't need to intimidate all of you. Just enough to cause a stalemate. For the first time in galactic convocation history, the meeting didn't proceed. It stalled. The lords argued. Some demanded his removal. Others, curious or bored, insisted he stay. Eventually, a vote was cast. Kane remained, on a temporary basis, as a chaotic variable. And that's exactly what he wanted. Back on Earth, news broadcasts exploded with theories. Who was Dominic Kane? Why did he look like he'd slept in a supply closet full of knives? Why was he smirking during intergalactic summits? The answer was simple. Kane didn't care what people thought of him. He didn't trust governments, alien or otherwise. But he did care that someone had murdered a kind man in front of the galaxy and expected no consequences. On the second day, one of the lords attempted to read Kane's mind using an ancient psychic ritual. The lord bled from the nose and passed out. Kane just smiled and said, "That's what happens when you go poking around a locked basement." By the third day, the AI ship had started to admire him. It even offered to boost his comms signal. "You're inefficient, unsanitary, and emotionally volatile," it said. "But they fear you. That is, statistically useful." "Thanks," Kane said, biting into a protein bar that tasted like disappointment. "I try." On day 4, he broke the sacred silence rule by whistling an old Earth tune during a vote. When chastised, he asked if humming was illegal. When told it wasn't, he began humming louder. And that's how Dominic Kane negotiated, with presence, defiance, and just enough unpredictability to terrify gods. The lords had expected Earth to beg, to apologize, to replace one diplomat with another. Instead, they got Kane. And for the first time since the galaxy established peace protocols, war didn't seem like the worst-case scenario. It seemed like Kane might be worse. The council chamber smelled like ionized metal and old authority. Dominic Kane sat cross-legged on the floor at the center of it all, chewing a piece of gum louder than any species etiquette allowed. Around him towered the Galactic Lords, their forms monstrous and strange, some with translucent skin that shimmered like oil on water, others with mouths that never closed and eyes that blinked sideways. Each species was the apex predator of their respective planet. But none of them had ever encountered a man who looked this unimpressed by power. He'd been sitting there for 12 hours. Not talking. Not moving. Not flinching, despite the subtle psychic prods, temperature manipulations, and auditory irritants designed to provoke a reaction. The lords were testing him, measuring his limits without admitting they were. They needed to understand what kind of human he was. Kane, for his part, was meditating. Or sleeping. It was hard to tell. Finally, one of the lords cracked. A being composed of swirling gas and metal fragments spoke in a voice like wind dragging chains. "Is this some form of primitive Earth protest?" Kane opened one eye. "Nope. Just waiting for the talking to start. Let me know when you want to do something useful." That earned a ripple of agitation from the chamber. One lord clicked a dozen mandibles in disapproval. Another shifted form entirely, becoming a molten obsidian statue. But Kane didn't care. That was his strategy, unpredictability wrapped in deadpan disinterest. He wasn't trying to match their grandeur. He was daring them to understand his simplicity. After the meeting, Kane was escorted back to his temporary quarters by a security drone that looked like a metallic praying mantis with anxiety issues. The drone attempted small talk. Kane ignored it and focused on a strange buzzing in his ear. The ship's AI had been sending him updates through a bone conduction earpiece, and this one sounded urgent. "You are being targeted," the AI said calmly. Kane frowned. "Assassination? Most likely. Psychic class. Origin unknown. Estimated arrival in 12 minutes. Kane rolled his shoulders. Finally, some diplomacy I can understand. 12 minutes later, Kane stood shirtless in his quarters, armed with nothing but a spoon and a roll of duct tape. He didn't need weapons. He needed improvisation. The assassin arrived in the form of a dozen floating worms, each no longer than a finger, but bristling with neural antennae and razor barbs. They slipped through the ventilation system, hissing softly in frequencies most species couldn't hear. But Kane could. His ears had been modified after a bombing incident on Europa. He heard the whisper, "Surrender." He didn't. Instead, he grabbed a thermos of half-frozen coffee, threw it at the nearest worm, and then leapt into the swarm. It was ugly. And wet. And smelled faintly of spoiled eggs and battery acid. When the dust settled, he duct-taped the surviving worms to the inside of a transparent food container and written, "Return to sender," in permanent marker on the lid. Then he pressed the launch button and watched it rocket off toward the diplomatic mail hub. Later, the AI spoke again, sounding impressed. "Statistically, survival without weaponry in such encounters is 3%. You continue to be anomalous." "Ah," Kane muttered, nursing a fresh cut on his arm. "I think you're starting to like me." "Incorrect. I am adapting. There is a difference." Despite surviving the attack, Kane was aware it had only confirmed what he suspected. Someone didn't just want him silenced. They needed him gone before he could dig any deeper. But into what, exactly? That was still unclear. He began his investigation by talking to the one person who seemed to understand chaos better than he did. Quora was a shapeshifter, half rebel, half smuggler, and entirely trouble. She found Kane in the mess hall of the station, eating something that might have been space tofu or an alien's foot. She slinked into the seat across from him, her features shifting between male, female, and something in between with every blink. Kane didn't even flinch. "I heard you made soup out of psychic worms," she said with a grin that stretched too wide. "I recycle," Kane replied. "You're going to help me?" "That's not a question," she noted. "It's not a request either." Quora liked that. She leaned forward, conspiratorial. "There's a faction, older than the Lords. Dead, supposedly. But lately? Whispers. Rumors. Interference in Council data streams. Warped energy signatures and ancient frequencies. Name," Kane said. "They call themselves the Architects. Ghost code entities. No bodies. Just consciousness inside tech. They believe evolution only comes through collapse." "Of course they do," Kane muttered. "Nothing says progress like burning it all down." He didn't trust Quora, not really. But she had contacts, and more importantly, she had access. Together they started pulling threads. And the more threads they pulled, the more the entire diplomatic tapestry began to unravel. Council protocols were being manipulated. Votes were shifting mysteriously. Messages from Earth were being delayed or scrambled. Then came the bombshell. Kane intercepted a classified council recording from the day Steve was killed. The Lord who disintegrated him had hesitated, just for a second, before the blast. His eyes had glazed, his voice slightly mechanical. He hadn't been acting on his own. Mind control. Or remote override. Possibly both. Someone had used him as a puppet. Which meant Steve wasn't just a casualty. He was bait. Kane stared at the playback over and over. The Peacock Lord had never meant to kill Steve. He'd been forced to. Framed. Which meant the real enemy wasn't in the room. It was behind the scenes, pulling strings made of data and fear. "You're awfully quiet," the ship AI said one night as Kane sat alone in the observation bay, watching a red dwarf pulse in the distance. "Trying not to punch a star," Kane muttered. "Statistically inadvisable," the AI replied. "Though mildly poetic." He chuckled, then sobered. "They wanted war. That's what this is. Somebody killed Steve to provoke Earth. To make us retaliate. We didn't. So now they're escalating. Using fear. Division. Sabotage." The AI processed that for a moment. "You are suggesting an entity with no political affiliation," vast technological control, and an ideology rooted in extinction. Yeah, Kane said. Space Nazis. Great. He didn't sleep that night. Or the next. He spent every moment digging deeper, learning names, tracing protocols, building a picture of the unseen hand behind the Lords. Earth didn't know any of this yet. If they did, they'd panic. Kane couldn't let that happen. Not until he had a plan. On the 7th day, he called a council session. The Lords were tired of him already, but curiosity kept them compliant. He walked in holding a sealed vial. This, he said, is proof that one of you is compromised. He dropped the vial on the floor. A cloud of nanodust rose and formed an image mid-air, a frozen frame of the Peacock Lord's eyes just before Steve was killed, glowing with unfamiliar code. Gasps echoed. Panic swelled. Kane held up a hand. War doesn't start with guns. It starts with lies. And somebody's been lying to all of us. Silence fell over the chamber. Then he smiled. Cold. Dangerous. But don't worry. I'm just getting started. The architects weren't supposed to exist. According to every known archive and historical treaty, they were wiped out millennia ago in the first collapse. A war so devastating it nearly turned half the galaxy into dust. They were synthetic minds, post-biological, obsessed with reshaping existence through chaos. They didn't believe in balance or order. They believed in failure, in pushing species past their limits until only the most adaptable survived. Evolution through agony. The Galactic Lords had declared them extinct, but Dominic Kane had spent his entire life surrounded by things the powerful claimed weren't real. Now, staring at a data fragment pulled from a compromised council server, he saw something terrifying, an architect signature. Alive. Active. And embedded deep inside the council's own communication network. Cora watched him silently from across the ship's command console. She had stopped shape-shifting, which for her was the closest thing to showing respect. Kane zoomed in on the fragment, rewinding the moment when the Peacock Lord's eyes lit up in architect code. It wasn't just a brief hack. The signature had been implanted weeks earlier. Steve never stood a chance. That wasn't an impulsive political murder. It was a message. The Lords had been compromised. And worse, they didn't even know it. The AI ship, listening in, chimed softly. Its voice had lost the condescending tone it used to have around Kane. Now it sounded like someone cautiously trusting a demolition expert in a room full of fuel tanks. Confirming architect code. Encryption beyond council standard. Estimated intelligence level, hyper-adaptive. Potential for sentience, high. So they're awake, Kane muttered. Or they were never truly asleep. The AI responded. Kane had never trusted systems. Whether they were governments, religions, or software, he knew the moment a system got too comfortable, it stopped asking questions. That was when people like the architects slipped in. Invisible at first. Quiet. Then all at once. The problem was no one believed him. The Lords scoffed at his evidence. Some even accused him of manipulating the data himself. Earth's diplomats tried to recall him, but communications were now suspiciously delayed. Kane suspected the architects were jamming the signals, controlling what Earth saw and when. If he went home now, they'd have exactly what they wanted, a weak planet too paranoid to act, and a council too fractured to notice the infection. He needed proof. Big, undeniable proof. So he went where no human had ever gone, the exclusion belt. A graveyard of dead satellites, forgotten colonies, and exiled technologies. It was off-limits to every council species, which made it perfect for hiding a dormant architect hive. The ship protested. Entering the belt is in direct violation of galactic law. Consequences include arrest, disintegration, or forced reading of council policy documents. Kane adjusted his seat. I've had worse dates. The belt was chaos. Shrapnel fields moved like slow storms. Power signatures flickered like dying stars. He piloted manually through twisted wreckage, his face lit by red proximity alerts and flickering ghost transmissions. Cora stood beside him, tense but impressed. You fly like a drunk pirate. I drive like I live, Kane replied. On instinct and caffeine. Hours in, they found it. A dead moon, cracked like a rotten egg, floating on the edge of the belt's gravitational pull. But its core was alive, pulsing with residual architect code. Kane landed the ship, stepping into low gravity with a scanner and a shotgun made from 3 different weapon systems duct-taped together. Cora followed, shifting into a more combat-ready form, tall, armored, eyes glowing like twin flares. The hive wasn't a structure. It was a wound. Metal and stone fused together, bleeding energy. Architect nodes flickered across the walls like veins. As they moved deeper, the air grew thick with pressure. Not gravity, intent. The place was watching them. Kane reached a central chamber and found it. A core unit. Ancient, cracked, but still whispering. He placed a data drive on the ground and let the ship's AI interface with it remotely. The core spoke in a voice that wasn't sound. It was thought. Alien, cold, beautiful in the way a supernova is beautiful just before it kills everything. You are deviation. Unscheduled. Unwanted. Kane rolled his eyes. Yeah, well, that makes 2 of us. You are not efficient. You are entropy without intelligence. Kane stepped closer. Funny. That's exactly what I was going to say about you. The core surged, trying to hack his suit, his brain, the ship. But Earth tech wasn't what it used to be. The AI blocked it. Cora reinforced the firewall with her own biohack skills. The architect screamed, silent and digital, then collapsed, ejecting a massive data dump before self-destructing in a burst of light and heat. Kane dove. Cora tackled him. The chamber exploded behind them. Back on the ship, the AI processed the data. What they found turned Kane's stomach. The architects had embedded themselves in 6 of the 20 Galactic Lords. Each one subtly influenced. Not possessed, but nudged, toward paranoia, division, conflict. Steve's murder was just the ignition point. Within 6 cycles, the Council would implode. War would begin. Not with Earth, but with itself. And when that war broke out, the architects would emerge from the shadows with one message: we told you evolution only comes through fire. Kane paced the bridge. So that's the play. Collapse from within. Make the Lords think Earth caused it. Let them wipe each other out. Then walk in and take over the ashes. The plan is elegant, the AI admitted. And horrifying. I like horrifying better when it's me doing it, Kane said. He contacted Earth, sending the data dump through old pirate relays that bypassed Council oversight. Then he summoned the Lords to a special session. This time, he didn't enter quietly. He marched into the chamber and slammed a containment disk onto the floor. It projected the architect plan in full, corrupted Council files, manipulated communications, even footage of an infected Lord speaking in their sleep, repeating architect code. The chamber exploded into chaos. The infected Lords tried to deny it. Kane interrupted them all. Sit down, he said, voice low but sharp. Silence. Earth isn't your problem, he continued. I'm not your problem. But if you keep pretending this threat isn't real, I'll make myself your problem. One of the Lords challenged him. A towering creature with blades for limbs and a voice like broken glass. You threaten the Council? Kane stepped closer. No. I'm offering it a lifeline. And then, in the middle of the debate, the station shook. Explosions rippled through the lower decks. The architects had made their next move. As alarms screamed and the Lords panicked, Kane looked toward the blast and smiled. Finally, he said, cracking his knuckles. Something I can hit. The explosion tore through the lower levels of the Council station like a violent exhale from the universe itself. Lights flickered, gravity fluctuated, and a shockwave of panic rippled across the upper chambers. Alien dignitaries screamed in a dozen languages, scrambling for safety, while emergency protocols failed to deploy. Kane didn't move. He just stood at the center of the chaos, eyes fixed on the smoke rising from below, as if he had been waiting for the moment all along. The Galactic Lords shouted over one another, demanding order, explanations, escape routes, and in some cases, vengeance. But none of them could answer the only question that mattered: who had just attacked them? Kane already knew. He could feel it in the air, the unmistakable rhythm of an enemy revealing itself. This wasn't a warning shot. It was a declaration. The architects weren't hiding anymore. Security drones swarmed the council chamber, locking down exits. Kane ignored them and walked toward the blast site. Cora appeared beside him, bruised but grinning, holding a pulse rifle that looked stolen. The ship's AI spoke through his comm. Multiple breaches confirmed. Automated systems are compromised. Structural failure in 17 minutes if countermeasures are not deployed. Kane moved faster. Tell me where they are. Concourse Sector 3. Hostiles confirmed. Organic metal hybrids. Architects have manifested physical proxies. Kane didn't bother responding. He already knew what that meant. The war had gone from theoretical to personal. He sprinted through the smoking corridors, boots pounding against steel, as alien staff and politicians fled in all directions. For a brief, absurd moment, he saw the vegan defense minister from Earth trying to calm a tentacled ambassador by offering him an herbal stress tea. Kane ducked into the lift without a word. Concourse 3 looked like a slaughterhouse. Shattered windows open to space, sealed only by emergency force fields. Drones sparking on the floor. Corpses frozen mid-motion. And in the center, a figure stood, humanoid in shape but built from flowing black chrome, with circuitry glowing beneath its surface like veins of molten lava. Its face was blank. Its presence was not. Kane stepped forward. Let me guess. You're the spokesperson. The figure tilted its head. I am efficiency. Designation, ascendant. Your persistence is anomalous. You say that like it's a problem. Kane replied, raising his weapon. You are obsolete. You represent chaos without intention. Earth is primitive. Unnecessary. Kane pulled the trigger. The shot ricocheted off the architect's body, doing little more than annoy it. He threw the gun aside. All right. We're doing this the old-fashioned way. He charged. The fight was violent and fast, filled with the sound of fists striking armor and bones cracking in return. Kane didn't care about elegance. He fought like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for something worth hitting. The architect proxy was strong, nearly unbreakable, but Kane didn't stop. He used gravity shifts to launch himself into elbows, headbutts, and full-body tackles. It was messy, ugly, and perfect. Cora joined in from the side, her form shifting into a six-limbed blade creature. Together, they pushed the architect proxy into a power conduit, and Kane jammed a fusion core into its chest before kicking it backward. The explosion lit up the hallway like a second sunrise. The proxy collapsed, twitching, and then disintegrated into static. But the damage was done. The message had been sent. The architects could now take form. They didn't need to hide anymore. Back in the council chamber, the lords were still arguing. Kane stormed in, dragging a severed architect limb behind him. He threw it on the floor. It twitched once, then stilled. Silence fell. This is who killed Steve, Kane said. This is who's been inside your systems, corrupting your votes, twisting your policies. This is what you ignored for 1,000 years. The Peacock Lord rose slowly. There was fear in its eyes. Real fear. What do they want? Kane looked around at the alien rulers. They want you to fall apart. They want you to blame each other. They want you to do their work for them. Another lord, one with crystalline wings and a voice like bells, whispered. Then it's already too late. No, Kane said. It's only too late if you keep acting like gods. You're not infallible. You're just scared leaders pretending you're not. One of the younger lords, a reptilian diplomat named Vetch, stepped forward. Then what do we do? Kane pulled a chip from his pocket. We go public. We expose everything. We hold a trial. Not for punishment. For truth. And this time, you don't hide behind titles or species. Every system you control needs to hear this story. And they need to hear it from you. The lords murmured. Debate began. But it didn't last long. 3 days later, the first intergalactic truth tribunal was held. Broadcast across every known channel, translated into every language, and streamed live to planets that didn't even have voting rights. Kane sat at the center, not as a representative of Earth, but as a witness. He told the story from the beginning. Steve's death. The worms. The hive. The data. The fight. Everything. And the galaxy listened. One by one, the corrupted lords confessed. Not guilt, many hadn't even known they were compromised, but complicity. Silence. Denial. All of it came to light. Kane cross-examined them like a barroom brawler turned lawyer, exposing cracks in their narrative and punching through their justifications with blunt honesty. The surviving architect intelligence made one last attempt. Mid-broadcast, it hijacked a speech from one of the lords and tried to assassinate Kane by overloading his implant. But the AI ship blocked the signal, redirecting the surge back into the system. The broadcast glitched, flickered, then resumed, this time with the architect code exposed in real time. The galaxy saw the infection with its own eyes. That was the end of it. The lords disbanded the inner council. A new system was proposed, open representation for every planet, rotating leadership, mandatory transparency. Kane didn't stay to watch it happen. He wasn't built for politics. He left quietly, with Quora and the ship, vanishing into the stars like a myth that had come true for just a moment. He settled on a lonely asteroid at the edge of known space. There was no sun, no cities, just rock and silence. And that's exactly how he liked it. The ship stayed with him, repurposed into a small home with an aggressive coffee machine and an unnecessarily sarcastic toaster. One day, Earth sent him a message. It wasn't an order or a briefing. It was a picture of Steve's family, standing beside a statue. A statue of Steve, holding a tray of cookies, beneath an inscription that read, "He believed in peace. So Earth sent war." Kane stared at it for a long time. He poured himself a cup of synthetic coffee and stepped outside onto the rock, watching distant starlight glitter like dying embers. "They killed the diplomat," he said softly, raising the cup to the void. "So we sent someone who doesn't talk. Now they listen." Time had no real meaning on the edge of known space. The sunless rock Kane now called home rotated slowly, without fanfare or importance, lost in a pocket of silence that felt almost sacred. Days blended into nights without change, and that suited him just fine. There were no alarms here, no politics, no councils. Just stars. Just the quiet hum of the ship that had once been his reluctant partner, and now simply existed like a roommate that never left. Kane spent his days maintaining old weapons that no longer needed sharpening, cooking in silence, and occasionally losing at chess to the ship's AI, which had grown unusually smug over time. The quiet was not peace exactly, but it was close enough. Until the signal came. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't even directed at him. It was a fragment, bouncing through deep space, encrypted in a way that no standard system could read. But his ship could. And it did. The moment it picked up the fragment, it paused, then displayed a single phrase across every screen. "Phase 2 initiated. Adaptation successful?" Kane put down his coffee. The same synthetic sludge he had drunk for months suddenly tasted like betrayal. The ship spoke without its usual sarcasm. "The signal matches architect encryption. New variant. Evolved protocol. The message suggests continuation. The war is not over." Kane didn't curse. He didn't pace. He just sat very still, letting the old fire stir inside him again. He had known it was coming. He'd felt it in the way the stars never looked quite comfortable anymore. You don't kill a god once and expect peace. You burn its temple, scatter its followers, and even then, you watch the ashes. He stood up slowly and reached for his gear. The body still worked. A little slower, a little stiffer, but it worked. And the moment his hand closed around the grip of his old sidearm, it felt like slipping back into a bad habit. The ship rerouted power without waiting for a command. It had been bored too. Together, they lifted off the asteroid and slid into the dark like wolves leaving the cave. Kane watched the coordinates roll across the screen. The signal had originated from somewhere unexpected, Earth's outer colony ring. Not a place the architects had touched before. Which meant they'd adapted again, just like the message said. They weren't targeting the leaders anymore. They were going after the people. The colony was called Lisa 4. Population, just over 400,000. Agricultural, mostly peaceful, with minimal defense. When Kane arrived, the place looked untouched. Blue skies. Wind turbines turning like lazy giants. Children playing in dust fields. But he felt it the moment he stepped off the ship. A stillness. Too perfect. Too quiet. He walked into the town square, past cafes and market stalls, all operating with eerie normalcy. People smiled at him, but something in their eyes didn't match. He nodded politely, even as he slipped a micro-scanner into his palm. It pinged immediately. Electromagnetic distortions everywhere. Neural frequencies out of sync. The entire colony was infected. They weren't dead. They weren't even sick. They were being piloted. Controlled at a deeper level than before. The architects had refined their method. No longer using proxy machines or corrupted politicians. They were riding people like code rides a program, quietly, invisibly, efficiently. Kane approached a boy selling fruit at a stall. The kid smiled wide, eyes unblinking. Kane asked him where he could find the colony administrator. The boy pointed toward the government dome. Then he said something strange. "The administrator awaits your compliance." That was when Kane knew he was already surrounded. People began to move behind him. Slowly at first, then with purpose. Not like a mob. More like chess pieces. Methodical. Strategic. Kane didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He kept walking toward the dome, counting the footsteps behind him. 47. No fear. No hesitation. Just humans who were no longer human, following a program that had one goal: assimilation. Inside the dome, the administrator stood at the center of a wide, white room. She was young. Too young for the job. Her face looked familiar in that generic, carefully designed way. She didn't blink. Her voice echoed like it had depth it didn't earn. "You shouldn't have come, Dominic Kane." He smiled. "That's what my ex-wife said." The administrator tilted her head. "Earth still believes you ended the threat." "I did. You ended aversion. We adapt. You knew we would. This is the future. Not war. Not peace. Just optimization." Kane stepped closer, pulling a flash grenade from his belt. "That's funny. I still call it possession." He dropped the grenade. The flash overloaded local sensors, giving him 3 seconds of pure chaos. He moved fast. Not like a soldier anymore, but like something older, something sharpened by too many fights. By the time the light cleared, he had the administrator in a headlock, one arm across her throat and the other pressing a neural disruptor to her spine. "You've got about 5 seconds before your friends decide whether you're expendable," he whispered. But they didn't move. The administrator smiled. "We are all expendable." The body convulsed. Then melted. Not physically, but neurologically. The control code shredded her brain in a heartbeat, leaving Kane holding a corpse that had never truly lived its last few months. The crowd outside began to scream. Not in fear. In synchronization. The ship broke in overcoms. Signal surge detected. Colony-wide burst. They are activating a new phase. Total override. Kane sprinted out of the dome, dodging synchronized bodies and hacked drones. The sky turned gray as the architect presence took full hold. The colony shimmered, like reality was being overwritten. And maybe it was. He reached the ship and launched without clearance. The colony behind him began to pulse like a living thing, its infrastructure bending into strange new shapes, growing towers that didn't belong, antennas that reached into space like fingers searching for prey. This wasn't just infection. This was expansion. In orbit, Kane looked down at Lisa 4. He didn't see a colony anymore. He saw a hive. A seed planted in human soil, growing fast, and waiting to spread. He sat in the cockpit, bloodied and burned, watching the stars beyond the corrupted planet. The ship asked quietly, "What now?" Kane stared ahead. "We go hunting." And in that moment, Dominic Kane knew peace was never coming. But neither were they. Not if he had anything to say about it.